There's a kind of silence that settles over an empty house, not one abandoned by intention, but a house no longer occupied after death. A home is a container that we fill with life. It becomes part of us. What happens when you try to keep a hold on what cannot be held? That's when you start opening doors that should not be opened. And you might not like what's waiting for you on the other side. Welcome to Dust and Echoes. My name is James Cawley. Every week I tell you a new original story. Stories that frighten, stories that inspire, and sometimes stories that do both. Tonight's story is from my new book, Hollow Season. Stories meant to be told in hushed tones around dancing firelight. Hollow Season is available now on my website, enterthedust.com, as well as on Amazon. Let's begin tonight's story. We don't fear death because it ends life. We fear it because it reminds us how little of life we truly lived. This is a story about memory, guilt, and the spaces we try to fill after love is gone. About the rituals we perform to feel close to what we've lost. And the quiet things that watch, waiting to be invited in. Grief opens doors. And in the stillness of what's left behind, not everything that enters is love. I call this story Scratch Twice. Thomas stood on the cracked sidewalk where he once learned to ride a bike long ago. His sister-in-law's car pulled away from the curb, and they waved at each other in the way people do when in grief. A slow raise of the hand, open palm pushed out, and a forced, sad smile. She had asked him to come stay with her and the girls, that he didn't have to stay here in this now empty house. He could tell she thought it was creepy, and maybe it was in a way, but it was something that he felt he had to do as part of this process of losing his mother. She could see that in him too, so she just nodded and told him to call if he needed anything. He watched her taillights fade and then vanish as she rounded the corner at the end of the neighborhood. He was alone now, and he turned and looked at the house. He just couldn't process it. The way he was feeling. He couldn't put a finger on it. This was the same house he grew up in. The house he would visit when he came to see his mother when he was in town over these last 20 years. Now, sitting there in front of him, he could feel its emptiness within. But he could still remember the bright soul it used to hold. She was the one that kindled that fire and kept it burning. And now, it was out. He hadn't expected it to hit him like this. Not now. Not after the funeral, the flowers, the eulogy that had cost him 3 separate panic attacks and a half a bottle of bourbon. Not after all the tears had already been wrung out. But it hit him now. Full force. This was the last time he'd ever opened this door as someone who belonged here. The last time this house would still be hers. Thomas closed his eyes. The image rose up instantly. The hospital, white and humming. The blue beeping machine behind his mother's sunken chest. The dry skin of her hand against his fingers gently rubbing her ankle in those last minutes, as if that single action could carry the weight of the 10 years he hadn't been there. She'd whispered something. He'd leaned in and heard just one word. Baby. That had wrecked him. Not Thomas. Not son, just that. Baby. The name only she could say without it sounding stupid. He had wept like a child, forehead pressed against the brittle bones of her arm. And then, just like that, she was gone. It was just that fast. He instantly recognized death on his mother's face as the machines began to alarm in the room. Her spark was removed from the shell that carried it. He opened his eyes and stared at the door. The house didn't look right in the dark. It looked unfinished, as though someone had started painting a picture of home and stopped halfway through. Every light off. He exhaled through his nose, slow. He pulled the key from his pocket and slid it into the lock. He jiggled it once, twice, and finally turned it with a dull metal clunk. The sound reverberated down the hollow hall like a voice in an empty cathedral. He stood in the entryway, letting his eyes adjust. Without the runner rug, the wooden floorboards looked exposed, long and pale where the sun hadn't touched them in years. The door clicked shut behind him, louder than it should have. Thomas locked it out of habit. Somewhere above him, the house shifted. A single creak, light as breath. He forced himself to ignore it. The front room was hollowed out, almost theatrical in its emptiness. No couch, no piano, no hutch with its glass doors and crammed teacups. He wandered toward the kitchen, each step too loud. The heels of his shoes echoed. He stopped short when something buzzed past his ear. A fly. It bumped against the glass pane in the side window once, then again. A soft tapping. Tick, tick, tick. He waved it away. It disappeared into the dark above the cabinets. The kitchen was wider now without the oval table. Just a pale ring on the floor, marking where it used to sit. A faint ghost circle of family dinners. The cupboards were empty, all of them, except the one above the stove, which held a battered soup pot. Heavy, blackened at the bottom. He'd kept it only because she'd made soup every Sunday for 30 years. Thomas set his hand on the cool metal lid. His palm tingled slightly. He blinked. Instantly, a memory came to him of touching the same pot when he was 5, the hot soup boiling inside, burning his skin. He quickly pulled his hand away. He opened the fridge without thinking. Empty. Off. Propped open with a wooden spoon. The interior light was gone, just white plastic shelving and a smell of disinfectant. He shut the door. A low, rubber thump. Then, annoyed with himself, he opened it again and left it propped, as it had been. The overhead light in the kitchen still worked, but it was a sharp, sterile white. It made the tile look like a hospital room. He didn't want to think of that place. So he turned the light back off and left the kitchen. He passed into the hallway again. A cold draft followed him, brushing lightly against the back of his neck. He turned. No window open, just the fly again. It tapped once more at the glass in the front door. He walked to the bottom of the stairs and paused. They looked exactly the same, carpeted in tan. The same faint squeak on the 3rd step, a half-inch dip in the 6th where he and Tim used to leap from. He didn't go up yet. Instead, he turned and opened the hall closet, just to check. He froze. On the floor was a framed photo, face down. He stared at it for a long moment before crouching. The frame was gold-toned, one of the cheap ones from the hallway. He knows that he took all those down himself, boxing them up and putting them in his car's trunk, along with all the other things he'd want to keep. So how did this one end up here? He turned it over. It was the picture of him and Tim, ages 7 and 9, standing in Halloween costumes on the front porch. He remembered that year. Their mom had made them swap costumes halfway through the night because he complained Tim's was cooler. The glass fogged faintly beneath his fingers, a photo of a moment he still could recall in vivid details. But something about finding this picture, face down in the closet when it should be packed up, left him feeling uneasy. He set the photo on the ground, leaning against the wall, so he would not forget to take it with him when he left. In the living room, he paused. The fly buzzed again, then vanished. Somewhere upstairs, a door clicked. Then nothing. Thomas stood still in the empty living room, trying to decide whether to pretend he hadn't heard it. He waited. Nothing followed. No creak, no step, no draft. The quiet didn't feel peaceful. It felt held, like someone had cupped their hands around the silence and was pressing it against his ears. He rubbed his neck. The hairs there were standing up again. Burger, he thought. That's what you need. Calories. Routine. He slipped on his shoes, grabbed his keys, and headed out the front door. The porch light buzzed overhead. The sky above Logan was a dull orange gray, the kind that didn't quite belong to night or weather. The burger place was open. He ordered 2. Ate one in the car, engine idling. Radio turned to some late-night talk show about politics or gardening. He wasn't listening. He just needed the voices. He chewed slowly, watching his own darkened reflection in the windshield. He didn't recognize it. The second burger, still warm, he wrapped carefully back in its paper and carried inside like an offering. The house had cooled again, not with the night air, but as though something inside had lost power or interest. Thomas stood in the entryway for a full beat, just listening. No sound from upstairs. No fly. He didn't turn on the main light, just the small lamp, the one that had always sat at the far end of the old couch. It was standing alone now, on the hardwood, cord stretched awkwardly to the wall. The light bloomed soft and yellow. Shadows pooled in corners. He carried the lamp into the dining room like a child moving a candle through a cave. He set it on the floor where the old table used to be, sat cross-legged, unwrapped the second burger, took one bite, chewed, swallowed, listened. His idea to have one last meal in the dining room seemed somewhat romantic when he crafted it in his mind. But now that he was sitting here on the empty floor where years of meals and laughter were once shared, he felt nothing. He was hoping he'd find a connection, a feeling that made him feel better. But now this was just some dark room. There was nothing. He reached for the burger again, paused, then wrapped it without looking and set it beside the lamp. He suddenly didn't want to see the meat, flesh with no life in it. In the kitchen, he washed his hands under cool water. The new soap bar was still in its wrapper. He peeled it open. It smelled nothing like her. She always used rose-scented soap. He braced his hands against the porcelain, watched the water swirl and vanish down the drain, trailing suds like dead petals. The silence afterward came down heavy again, like someone entering a room and closing the door behind them. He made himself do one more lap of the house. He stood in the garage a moment too long. The air out there had a strange smell, like cardboard that had gotten wet and then dried again. He thought of the box in the attic that used to hold their Christmas ornaments. He stepped back inside and heard his phone buzz where he had left it on the kitchen counter. He turned off the garage light and turned to lock the door. The living room was a pool of darkness, but he could see the amber glow of the lamp in the dining room. He walked more quickly than he'd like to admit through the darkness of the living room. He didn't glance up as he passed by the stairs. He'd do that once he had his phone in hand, its flashlight on. Thoughts of checking into a hotel had to be forced from his mind. He could do this. He wanted to do this. Close things out right. One more night in his childhood home to help spark the memories before he had to hand the keys over to the realtor in the morning. His phone screen was still lit where it sat on the counter. 2 messages. One from Lily asking him if he is doing okay. The other from his wife, sent from their home in Summerlin. He smiled as he watched the video she sent. It showed her and the kids blowing kisses and saying goodnight, and that they missed him. He replied to Lily and let her know that he was doing great. But that was a lie. He opened the Facebook app and started swiping and tapping in the darkness. Stopping suddenly, he realized he was burning time, fighting the realization that it was time for him to go upstairs and get some sleep. But he didn't want to go up those stairs to his old bedroom anymore. Down the hallway, past his mom's room. Shaking his head, he gathered his composure, unplugged the lamp, and put it under one arm. Its cord dragged behind him like a tail as he moved toward the stairs. The sharp brightness of his phone's flashlight cut through the darkness, casting large, unnatural shadows across the empty room. The upstairs lights would not work, except for the bathroom light. He put that bulb back in, but removed the others when he painted the rooms. In the daylight, he made the decision to throw them away, planning on a quick trip to the hardware store in the morning to replace them with the new LED ones, a decision he now regretted in the darkness. The stairway groaned under his feet in all the same places. That dip in the middle still pulled at his heel. He used to leap that spot as a kid, like it might swallow him. It felt like it might now. At the landing, he turned to the hallway. Without the family photos, it was a single unbroken line. Now the wall was just empty, with the faintest outlines like bruises under paint. He walked by his mother's closed bedroom door. Earlier that day, he had finished painting her room, saving it for last. Once he finished, he stood there in that room for a long time. Memories of all her things that used to clutter the now empty room were now gone. Worthless. Speaking out loud into the emptiness of the room, he had told her one last time that he loved her. He closed the door with the intent of never opening it again. It was not her room anymore. It was simply just a normal, empty room in an old, empty house now. His childhood bedroom door was open. Inside, the twin bed had been made. White sheet, thin blanket, a single pillow. He hadn't asked Lily to do that, but she must have. It made the room feel like a hotel or a hospital. He set the lamp down on the floor beside the bed, close enough to reach from under the blanket. The crooked lamp shade annoyed him again. He straightened it, then felt ridiculous for caring. The nightstand was bare. He placed his phone face down, then added his wallet and keys. Everything looked temporary, unanchored. He changed into a t-shirt and sweatpants and folded his suit jacket, placing it carefully on the floor beside the wall. There was no chair to drape it over anymore. That small detail tightened something in his chest. Then he reached out and ran his hand along the wooden headboard, found the small chip in the carving, the one he used to hook his finger into when he couldn't sleep. It was still there, still deep enough to catch his thumb. Bathroom next. He walked the hallway in the dark, trailing one hand along the wall. The air felt different now, thinner, like walking through a vacuum. The weight of things felt off. The bathroom light flicked on, buzzing faintly. He avoided the mirror, looked anyway. A tired man stared back. Red eyes, skin too pale. He finished getting ready for bed and brushed his teeth quickly. There was a smell coming from the drain, something earthy and unpleasant. He stood readying himself in the glowing buzz of the bathroom light. He flicked off the light switch and moved quickly across the darkness and into the golden glow from the lamp illuminating his room. He left the bedroom door open, just a crack. He always had, even as a kid. It had been so he could call for her, if he needed to. He sat on the bed. The frame creaked. The mattress sagged. The lamp's yellow pool didn't quite reach the far corners. He laid down on his back and pulled the blanket to his chest. The hallway used to scare him most. He'd leave the door cracked, just enough to call for his mom if he needed to. He'd lie on his back and count until sleep came. On some nights, the ones where his counting kept going, his mother would come to check on him. She didn't turn on the light. She would just cross the room, sit on the bed, and softly rub and scratch his right ankle gently. He remembered the drag of her nail, always clipped and rounded, across his skin. He reached for the lamp and pulled the chain. The click echoed. Darkness folded into the room like water. Every sound stood out too sharply, too alone. A distant car passed, casting a wash of faint light over the window. Then, a sound, not distant, not plumbing, a hinge, a slow, soft scrape. He lifted his head. It was his door that made the sound. The hall was still dark, but the door, it had moved. Only by an inch. But it had moved. He stared at it. The gap was wider now, a faint slice of wall visible that hadn't been before. He waited, counted. His breath went shallow. Nothing. He told himself he was tired, that the latch hadn't caught. He laid his head back down, tried to push the thought away. He closed his eyes, opened them again. The door hadn't changed, still cracked. His eyelids began to drift. Then, a creak. He snapped upright. The door moved again. This time he saw it. Just an inch, just enough. The hall air slid into the room like a whisper. Cool. Different. His heart thudded. His fingers tightened on the blanket. He didn't speak, didn't move, didn't want to believe it was anything. And then it came. Soft, familiar. The faintest touch at the side of his ankle. 2 fingers, a single stroke. Then again. Not tickling, just pressure. The weight of memory collapsed over him like a wave. She had done that all the time. When he was sick, when he was scared, when the world had been too loud and she'd made it quiet again. He knew that rhythm. It was hers. He didn't move because he didn't want it to stop. This meant she was still here, and he wanted to hold on to the moment. The room smelled faintly now, not of soap, of leaves, wet, matted leaves left in a bucket. The smell didn't belong here, but he didn't push it away. He whispered, "Mom?" Nothing. The touch continued. He tried again. Softer. "Mama." That one felt right. That one felt like her. The pressure paused for a moment, then resumed. Gentle strokes, reassuring. His throat burned. He whispered, "If it's you," scratch twice. The fingers stopped. The room held its breath. He waited. Then, scratch. A slow, deliberate line across the ankle bone, sharp enough to sting. A pause. Scratch. A second stroke, deeper this time. Thomas let out a long, shaking breath. That was her. It had to be. He felt the tears slip out of the corners of his eyes. He didn't care. He sat up slowly, blanket still over his lap, eyes straining to see the shape at the foot of the bed. A faint difference in the dark was all. He leaned forward. He nodded. "I know it's you." The air changed. A shift so fast and so cold it felt like the room exhaled from the inside out. And then came the third scratch. Hard, violent. It ripped across his ankle like a blade. Thomas cried out. The dark at the foot of the bed leaned in. Not her. Not anyone. No shape. No face. Just black. Dense and wet, like soil. It did not reflect light. It erased it. The doorway behind it vanished. The hall behind it ceased to exist. It was everything the house was now. Hollow. Faceless. Pretending. It moved toward him, not crawling, not stepping, just expanding. Pressing into him. Thomas gasped, tried to speak, but the words caught. Because now he understood. This wasn't her. This was what had come instead. In that instant, he knew she was gone. And he'd missed it. All of it. The long conversations on the phone that never happened, because he was too busy with work. The trip they never took to see her last summer, because it was just too much to plan. He had missed out on life. Her life. The moments that cannot be relived or preserved. What he called to that night was not his mother. He called for the darkness to prove itself. And it listened. It always listens. The end. Grief lingers in places we once lived, in objects we keep, in silence we try to fill. But the truth is, life matters because it ends. The warmth of a moment can't be recaptured, only remembered. That's what makes it beautiful. That's what makes it real. He forgot this. And in his guilt, he left the door open. Something else stepped in. We all carry our grief differently. Some stagger forward, holding it like pockets full of stones. Others live with it, pretending it's not already woven into them. We must always remember this in those times. Just like autumn is beautiful in a different way than spring, the darkness is always temporary. And there is always a way, a path back into the light. But only if we choose to look for it. That was Scratched Twice. Written and performed by the author, me, James Cawley. This story is about the weight we carry when we don't embrace life while we still can. It's a reminder that the most frightening thing may not be what we lose, but what we invite in while trying to get it back. If you like stories like this, then you're in the right place. Make sure to check out our YouTube channel, where I bring some of these stories to life through animation. You can find a direct link on my website at enterthedust.com. I release a new original story in cinematic audiobook format every single week, right here. I'll be waiting for you next time. And I think you'll love the next story I have to tell. Until next time, remember this. The greatest thing death can take from us is not life, but the moments we gave away before it ever arrived.